There's a moment most people experience around midlife where you catch yourself reacting to something, a criticism, a disappointment, a particular phrase someone uses, and you realize you've had this exact reaction before. Not similar, exact. Same tightness in your chest, same thought sequence, same words you almost say but don't, same 3-hour internal argument afterward. And what strikes you isn't the emotion itself, it's the precision of it, the mechanical certainty. Like watching the same superroutine execute again. Most of us call this just who I am, my temper, my sensitivity, my way of dealing with things. But what if that's not what it is at all? I want you to consider something that might feel uncomfortable at first. Your emotional reactions aren't expressions of your authentic self. They're not your personality surfacing. They're not even really yours in the way you think they are. They're code, executable patterns written years ago, sometimes decades ago, now running automatically whenever specific conditions are met. You don't get angry because anger is who you are. You get angry because anger is what runs when a particular input triggers a particular sequence you've reinforced 10,000 times. The feeling that this anger is you, that's part of the program too. Here's what I mean by that. Think about the last time someone questioned your competence at work. Maybe they didn't even question it directly. Maybe they just asked for clarification on something you'd already explained, or suggested a different approach to a project you'd been leading. And something happened in your body before your mind even caught up. A heat, a defensiveness. Your jaw set slightly. Your next sentence came out with an edge you didn't fully intend, but also didn't stop. Now, in that moment, it felt like they made you defensive, like their action caused your reaction. Input, output, simple causation. But go deeper. Why did that specific input produce that specific output in you? When the same input produces something entirely different in the person sitting next to you, they heard the same question and felt nothing, or curiosity, or relief that someone was engaged enough to ask. The difference isn't the input was identical. The difference is the program. Somewhere in your history, maybe in childhood, maybe in your 20s, maybe in a relationship that carved its patterns deep, you wrote a program. It went something like this. When someone questions what I know, it means they don't respect me. When they don't respect me, I'm not safe. When I'm not safe, I must defend. Defense looks like edge, like sharpness, like making them back down. You didn't write this program consciously. You didn't sit down and decide, this is how I'll respond to perceived challenges. You wrote it through repetition, through reinforcement, through running the same pattern over and over until it became automatic, until it became invisible, until it became you. And now it just runs. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years ago, though they didn't have our language for it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But he also wrote something more precise, more algorithmic. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Your estimate, your interpretation, your internal processing of the input, not the thing itself. Never the thing itself. What Marcus was describing, what he spent decades training himself to recognize, was the gap between stimulus and response. The space where code executes, the moment where a program runs before you even realize it's running. And what he discovered was that you can't control the inputs, but you can examine the code. Most psychological frameworks tell you to manage your emotions, to regulate them, to cope with them. That's not what this is. This isn't emotion management. This is code auditing. Because once you stop identifying as your reactions and start identifying them as reactions, as automated subroutines running predictably in response to specific triggers, everything changes. You stop asking, why do I feel this way? And start asking, what conditions trigger this sequence? You stop trying to control the feeling and start examining what produces it. You become less like someone drowning in their own responses and more like an engineer looking at legacy code they inherited but didn't write. There's a pattern many people carry, especially those who grew up navigating unstable environments or unpredictable caregivers. It's a hypervigilant superteam. It runs like this. Monitor all faces in the room. Check tone of voice. Scan for microexpressions suggesting displeasure. If detected, run through catalog of possible things I did wrong. Prepare explanations. Adjust behavior preemptively. Minimize self to avoid becoming target. This code was adaptive once. It kept you safe when you're small and powerless and needed to predict danger. But here's what happens. You're 47 now. You're in a meeting with colleagues who respect you. Someone across the table frowns slightly while reading their email. The program runs. Instantly, your nervous system activates. Your attention narrows. You're no longer fully present in the meeting. Part of you is now running threat assessment protocols, scanning your recent interactions with that person, wondering what you did, preparing your defense. They were frowning at a spam email. It had nothing to do with you. But your code doesn't know that. Your code doesn't care about context. It just runs when triggered. They experience the output, the anxiety, the defensiveness, the withdrawal, the anger, the shame spiral, and they think that's who they are. I'm an anxious person. I have anger issues. I'm too sensitive. No. You're a person running anxious code. You're a person executing anger protocols. You're a person with sensitivity subroutines that fire on hair triggers. It's not your identity, it's your programming. And programming can be examined, understood, rewritten. Here's the practice, the actual work of algorithmic stoicism. First, you learn to catch the execution in real time. This is harder than it sounds because the program runs so fast, so automatically, that you usually only notice after you're already 3 steps into the sequence. You're already defensive, already spiraling, already mid-reaction. So you start by training retroactive awareness. After the reaction, when things are calm, you review the footage. You replay what happened. Not to beat yourself up, that's useless code too, but to map the sequence with precision. What was the exact trigger? Not the general category. The specific words, tone, context, timing. What was the first physical sensation? Where in your body did the program initiate? Chest, throat, stomach, shoulders. What was the first thought? The actual sentence that appeared in your mind, not the story you tell about it later. Then what? What came next? And next? What did you do, say, feel, think? Map it with the precision of someone debugging code, because that's what you're doing. However, what would you do? Second, you identify the pattern's origin story. Most emotional programs were written in response to specific conditions that no longer exist. They're legacy code, solutions to problems you faced 20 years ago, still running in an entirely different environment. That hypervigilance? It made sense when you were 10, and your father's mood determined whether dinner would be calm or explosive. It kept you safe. That defensiveness around competence? It made sense when you were the first in your family to go to college, and every question felt like someone testing whether you belonged. It protected you. That retreat into isolation after conflict? It made sense when you were in a relationship where your needs were treated as burdensome. It preserved you. But you're not in those conditions anymore. The code is still running, but the problem it was designed to solve no longer exists. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." He wasn't saying just think positive or choose happiness. He was saying, examine what's actually running, because your reaction is probably solving a problem from 1987. This is the part most people get wrong. They think rewriting emotional patterns means suppressing the old response or forcing a different feeling. No, you can't delete legacy code while it's running. You can't suppress an emotional program through willpower. That just creates a suppression program that runs alongside the original, making everything more complex. Instead, you write an alternative pathway, a competing program, one that you consciously execute before the old pattern has time to fully load. Let's use that competence questioning trigger as the example. The old program: someone questions your work, try interpret as disrespect, feel threat, defend sharply, create tension, feel guilty later, ruminate for hours. The new program, written consciously, executed deliberately: someone questions your work, pause recognition, this is the trigger. The old code wants to run. Take one slow breath. Take one slow breath. Alternative interpretation: this is just a question. Multiple interpretations available. Choose useful one. New response: curiosity. Tell me more about what you're thinking. The first 17 times you try this, the old program will still run. The new code will feel clunky, artificial, slow. That's normal. That's what rewriting feels like. But around the 20th time, something shifts. The new pathway starts to deepen. The old one starts to weaken. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you're literally building new neural architecture through repetition. You're not managing your emotions, you're replacing the algorithm. Here's what makes this different from standard therapeutic approaches. Most therapy asks, what does this feeling mean? Where does it come from? How can we understand it? Those are useful questions. But they keep you in relationship with the pattern, trying to manage it, cope with it, make peace with it. Algorithmic Stoicism asks, is this code serving me? Is it solving a current problem or a historical one? Do I want to keep running it? It's not about understanding your anger. It's about recognizing that anger is a supertoot you've reinforced for 30 years, and you can stop reinforcing it. It's not about healing your anxiety. It's about seeing that anxiety is a prediction algorithm trained on old data, and you can train it on new data. You're not a victim of your emotional patterns. You're the one executing them. Seneca, in his letters, describes something very close to this. He wrote about examining his day each night, reviewing his reactions with a kind of clinical precision. Not to judge himself, but to see clearly. What bad habit have I cured today? What failing have I resisted? Where can I show improvement? He was debugging. Every night, reviewing the code that ran during the day, identifying the triggers, the patterns, the places where old programming executed automatically, planning different responses, testing new approaches. This is not ancient philosophy as inspiration. This is ancient philosophy as practical cognitive engineering. But here's the thing most people miss. You can't rewrite code you haven't acknowledged exists. As long as you believe your reactions are you, authentic expressions of your true self, you can't examine them clearly. You can only defend them, justify them, explain why they make sense. The shift happens when you realize these reactions are no more you than your accent is you, than your driving habits are you, than the way you load the dishwasher is you. They're learned, reinforced, habituated, automated, which means they can be unlearned, unreinforced, replaced. The you underneath the code, the awareness that can watch the code run, that's what you actually are. There's a specific moment when this clicks for people. I've seen it happen dozens of times. Someone is mid-reaction, angry, defensive, spiraling, and suddenly they pause. And they say something like, "Oh, I'm doing the thing again." Not, "I'm feeling angry." Not, "They made me defensive." "I'm doing the thing." No. That sentence, that recognition is everything. Because in that moment, there's separation. There's a you observing the pattern rather than being the pattern. And once you can observe it, you can work with it. This is what Marcus meant when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. Your emotional patterns aren't obstacles to overcome. They're the most precise roadmap you have to your own programming. Every trigger point is a marker showing you where old code still runs. Every disproportionate reaction is a sign that legacy systems are executing. Every time you find yourself in the same emotional sequence you've experienced 1,000 times before, you're getting information. Not information about the world, information about your code. Let me show you what this looks like in the long term, because the real transformation isn't dramatic, it's cumulative. You don't wake up one day, suddenly enlightened, free from all reactive patterns. What happens is subtler and more useful. You're in a situation that would have triggered the old program. Someone criticizes you, or something doesn't go as planned, or you're facing uncertainty. The old code starts to load. You feel the first stirrings, the physical sensations, the initial thought patterns. But now there's a gap, a half second where you see it starting to run. And in that gap, you make a choice. Sometimes you let it run anyway. You're tired. You don't have the bandwidth to intervene, whatever. But sometimes, more and more often, you execute the alternative. The old code doesn't fire. The new pathway activates instead. And what you feel isn't a forced suppression or a strained coping mechanism. You feel nothing, or curiosity, or steadiness. Not because you're controlling your emotions, because you stopped executing the program that generates those emotions in the first place. This is what emotional maturity actually is. Not the ability to manage big feelings. The wisdom to see which feelings are actually responses to present reality and which are automated replays of historical patterns. Not the strength to endure your reactions, the clarity to recognize their reactions, executable code, not inevitable truth. The Stoics called this apatheia. It's usually mistranslated as without passion or without emotion, which makes it sound cold and distant. But the actual meaning is closer to without pathos, without involuntary suffering, without being subject to automatic emotional patterns that run without your consent. It doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you stop suffering from the things that aren't actually happening. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most of what you suffer isn't the actual events of your life. It's the code running in response to events. Your job ends. That's the event. Concrete, finite. But then the code runs. I'm unemployable. I'm failing. I'm falling behind. Everyone's judging me. I'll never recover. This means something terrible about who I am. None of that is the event. That's all program execution. Triggered automatically, running familiar pathways, generating familiar suffering. And you can sit in therapy for years working on why you feel this way about unemployment, and maybe you'll understand it better. Or you can recognize it as buggy code and start writing something more useful. Practical question: what's buggy code versus what's legitimate response to actual problems? This matters because some things should activate emotional responses. If you're in actual danger, fear is useful. If someone you love dies, grief is appropriate. If you're being genuinely mistreated, anger gives you energy to establish boundaries. The distinction is this: useful emotional responses are proportionate to present reality and resolve when the situation resolves. Buggy code is disproportionate, repetitive, and persists regardless of changing circumstances. If you're anxious before every meeting for 6 months, even though the meetings consistently go fine, that's buggy code. If you're defensive every time your partner makes a neutral observation, even though they've never actually attacked you, that's buggy code. If you catastrophize every small setback as evidence of total failure, even though your actual track record shows resilience, that's buggy code. The pattern repeats independent of evidence. That's how you know it's legacy programming, not present moment response. Here's what happens as you do this work over years. You become less predictable to yourself. That might sound strange, but it's one of the most liberating shifts. You stop knowing exactly how you'll react to things because you've stopped running the same programs. Someone criticizes you, and you might feel genuinely curious about their perspective, or nothing at all, or momentary irritation that passes in seconds rather than colonizing your evening. You don't know which it'll be because you're no longer locked into one automatic response. This is freedom. Not the freedom to feel whatever you want. That's not how feelings work. The freedom to not be enslaved by patterns you reinforced in 1993. How long, Marcus Aurelius, in one of his private notes. Marcus Aurelius, in one of his private notes, wrote something that sounds almost bitter at first. How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? He wasn't talking about other people's anger. He was talking about his own. The most powerful man in the known world. And what he was working on every day wasn't conquering more territory or accumulating more power. It was recognizing that his own reactive patterns caused more damage to his life than anything anyone could do to him. The thing that defeats you isn't the insult, the setback, the disappointment. It's the code that runs in response. The cascade of thoughts and feelings and behaviors that follow automatically, that hijack hours or days of your life, that damage relationships and cloud judgment and drain energy. That's the real cost, and it's optional. However the practice actually looks like, day to day, you begin to live with a kind of quiet observation running in the background. Not constant self-monitoring, that's exhausting and becomes its own dysfunctional pattern. More like a gentle awareness, a part of you that's watching what's running. When something activates you, you notice, the defensiveness superteam is loading. When you feel anxiety ramping up, you recognize, this is the catastrophizing algorithm, trained on decades of worst-case scenarios that rarely happened. When old guilt patterns start running, you see, there's the old code from the family system I grew up in, trying to make me responsible for everyone's feelings. You name the program, you recognize its signature. You see it as a thing that runs, not as truth. And slowly, over months and years, the programs lose their grip. Not because you've eliminated them, you'll probably carry traces of them your whole life, but because you've stopped believing they're you. Honestly, there's a particular flavor of freedom that comes with this. It's hard to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's not the freedom of having no problems. It's not the freedom of constant happiness or peace. It's the freedom of standing in the middle of your own life, watching old triggers fire, feeling old patterns try to load, and choosing whether to execute them. Sometimes you still do. Sometimes you're too tired, too stressed, too overwhelmed, and you let the old code run because that's what you have bandwidth for that day. But even then, you know what's happening. You're not drowning in your reactions anymore. You're watching them run, seeing them clearly, knowing they'll pass. That's the difference. Not perfection, perspective. Free from patterns that ran automatically. Free from reactions they didn't choose. Free from suffering that served no purpose except to reinforce itself. They were debugging themselves. And what they discovered, what you can discover, is that you're not your code. You're the awareness that watches code execute. The awareness that watches code execute. The presence that remains when patterns rise and fall. The steady thing underneath the reactive thing. Your anxiety isn't you. Your defensiveness isn't you. Your anger, your shame, your guilt, their spiraling thoughts, none of it is you. It's all code, written somewhere in your history, running automatically, generating predictable outputs, and you can examine it, understand it, and rewrite it. Not easily, not overnight, not perfectly, but really.